What would you do if the person you trusted most, the one you built a life with, shattered your heart in the most unforgivable way? How far would you go when betrayal turns your world upside down? In the summer of 2002, a picture-perfect couple in Texas found their seemingly ideal life unraveling in ways no one could imagine, ending in an act so shocking it would haunt the nation for years to come. Clara Harris was a wife, a mother, and a respected dentist. Her husband, David Harris, was her partner in life and in business, a man she believed shared her dreams and devotion. Together, they ran a successful practice, raised a blended family, and embodied the American dream. But beneath the surface of their seemingly flawless marriage, something was terribly wrong. She thought she had it all, until whispers of suspicion crept into her mind. The late-night phone calls, the unexplained absences, the growing distance in her husband's gaze. Clara's unease became impossible to ignore. What she discovered would lead her down a path of heartbreak, fury, and ultimately, a crime that shocked the nation. Clara wasn't prepared for the truth. Her husband was having an affair with his young, attractive receptionist. And in a desperate attempt to save her marriage, the unthinkable happened. But how did it come to this? How does a love story end in such devastation? To understand, we must go back to the beginning. This is the story of Clara Harris, a woman pushed beyond her limits, and the tragic consequences of a love gone terribly wrong. Before we dive into this gruesome crime story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more captivating true crime cases. Let us know in the comments, what would you do if you uncovered a betrayal like this? When Clara and David Harris exchanged vows in 1992, it was a moment filled with hope and promises of forever. Clara, originally from Colombia, had moved to the United States with big dreams and an unrelenting work ethic. She was drawn to David's charm, his ambition, and the way he seemed to share her vision of a successful, loving partnership. Over the years, they built a life many could only dream of. Together, they opened 2 thriving dental practices in Friendswood, Texas. Clara managed the operations with precision, while David handled patients with ease and charisma. They were partners in every sense of the word, professionally and personally. Clara trusted David completely, and that trust became the foundation of their family, which included twin boys and David's daughter from a previous marriage, Lindsay. But as their family flourished, cracks began to form beneath the surface. Clara started noticing changes, subtle at first. David was distracted, his phone always in his hand, his once loving demeanor becoming distant. She told herself it was just the stress of running a business. But then, there were the excuses. Late nights at work, unexplained absences, and the growing gulf between them. The breaking point came when Clara found something she couldn't ignore, a receipt for a gift David couldn't explain. Confronting him, she demanded answers. David admitted to an affair but promised it was over. Clara, desperate to save her marriage and family, forgave him. She believed him when he said he wanted to rebuild their life together. But David's promises had been empty. The affair was far from over. His mistress, Gail Bridges, wasn't just any woman. She was the receptionist at their dental practice, someone Clara knew and trusted. Gail was younger, glamorous, and had been working closely with David for years. Clara's world came crashing down as she realized the betrayal wasn't just physical. It was personal. Clara's discovery of David's continued infidelity left her devastated. But heartbreak quickly turned to rage. But how did she discover that David didn't stop? Trust is fragile. Once broken, every action, every word, becomes a question. For Clara Harris, the weight of suspicion was unbearable. The man she had built her life with, the father of her children, was still lying to her, and she needed proof. Proof not just to confirm her fears, but to understand the depth of his betrayal. Clara's decision to hire a private investigator marked the point of no return. She handed over her suspicions, her fears, and her trust to someone who could deliver answers. The investigator didn't disappoint. Within days, Clara was handed undeniable evidence of David's affair. Photos of him and Gail entering a hotel, their closeness unmistakable. The reality was devastating. It wasn't just the affair. It was the deception. The way David had continued to lie to her face while carrying on with Gail. Clara felt humiliated, betrayed, and powerless. But her pain soon turned into something else entirely. She couldn't just sit back and let this happen. She needed to confront him, to make him understand what he was destroying. On July 24, 2002, Clara decided she had to know for herself. She followed David to the Nassau Bay Hilton after receiving a tip from the investigator. She drove with a mix of anger and heartbreak, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as her mind raced with questions. Was this truly the man she had built her life with? And what was she supposed to do now? Inside, David and Gail were having dinner, laughing as though nothing else in the world mattered. Clara watched from a distance, the scene confirming everything she didn't want to believe. Her heart broke all over again, but it was the sight of them leaving together, smiling, carefree, that finally shattered her resolve. What happened next in the parking lot would leave even the most hardened detective speechless. Clara Harris was about to make a decision that would change her life forever and end someone else's. Betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. They can drive a person to the edge. For Clara Harris, that edge was a hotel parking lot on a warm summer evening in Texas. What happened in those moments wasn't just a crime. It was a raw, unfiltered eruption of rage that left witnesses stunned and a family shattered forever. Inside the hotel, Clara's footsteps echoed against the polished floors. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the restaurant. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling steaks and the faint tang of red wine. But Clara wasn't there for dinner. She was there for the truth. And there it was, just ahead of her. David and Gail sat close, leaning toward one another, their laughter cutting through the ambient noise of clinking glasses and low conversation. Clara's anger erupted. She stormed over, her voice trembling with fury as she confronted them. The hotel lobby fell silent as guests turned to watch the confrontation. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. David tried to calm her, his words fumbling, but Clara wasn't listening anymore. She felt the heat of betrayal like a fire consuming her from the inside out. The confrontation spilled into the parking lot. Clara, now visibly shaking, marched toward her car. David and Gail followed at a distance, their faces a mixture of guilt and unease. The humid Texas air clung to Clara's skin as she climbed into her Mercedes-Benz. The leather seat was hot from the sun, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced with every hurtful moment, every broken promise. She felt her grip tighten around the steering wheel. Then, in a split second, Clara made a choice. The engine roared to life, the tires screeched against the asphalt, and the car lurched forward. Witnesses watched in horror as the silver Mercedes accelerated toward David. The sound of impact was sickening, a dull thud followed by the crunch of metal. David's body was thrown onto the hood before collapsing onto the ground. But Clara didn't stop. Overwhelmed by a surge of fury and despair, she circled back and drove over David again. And again. The parking lot was filled with the sound of tires screeching, desperate screams from onlookers, and the terrible crunch of flesh and bone beneath the car. The smell of burning rubber filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. David's teenage daughter, Lindsay, sat frozen in the car, tears streaming down her face. She pleaded with Clara, screaming for her to stop, but her words were drowned out by the chaos. The girl's hands pressed against the window as she watched her father's lifeless body crumple beneath the car. The entire incident was caught on surveillance cameras, leaving no room for doubt about what had happened. Clara's actions that night would seal her fate, but the question remained, what drives someone to commit such an unspeakable act? And could anything have stopped her? The screams, the fury, and the violence. Clara Harris's actions in that parking lot would forever be etched into the public's memory. But the question remained, how could the justice system respond to such a crime? Clara, once a respected dentist, was now a woman facing charges of murder. And as the trial unfolded, the courtroom became the stage for a battle that would pit raw emotion against cold logic. Clara was arrested on the night of the crime. She had turned herself in, her voice trembling as she confessed to running over David. The arrest was swift, but the consequences of her actions were far-reaching. The once vibrant woman, now a figure of sorrow and regret, was booked into jail. The legal battle ahead would be just as brutal as the crime itself. The prosecution's case was damning. The footage from the hotel parking lot, clear and unforgiving, played on a loop showing Clara driving over her husband again and again. The witnesses' testimonies painted a chilling portrait of a woman consumed by rage, a crime of passion that had escalated into murder. The prosecution painted Clara's actions as cold-blooded, deliberate. There was no doubt in their minds that Clara had set out to kill David in a moment of fury, but the defense painted a different picture. Clara's attorney argued that what happened in the parking lot wasn't murder. It was a tragedy brought on by a woman overwhelmed by emotional devastation. Clara had been betrayed by the man she loved, humiliated in front of the world, and her heart had shattered in ways no one could truly understand. The defense claimed that Clara's mental state at the time of the crime was not that of a rational person, but of someone on the brink of insanity. Her rage had been fueled by a mixture of heartbreak, betrayal, and emotional trauma. They argued that, in that moment, Clara had lost control, and her actions, though horrific, were the result of an unbearable emotional collapse. For Clara, the trial was a painful reminder of the life she had lost, of the family she had destroyed, and of the man she had loved. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the line between justice and mercy would be a difficult one to cross. In the end, Clara was convicted of second-degree murder. The jury found that, while she had not premeditated the killing, her actions were reckless and intentional. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that many believed was too lenient given the nature of the crime. Yet, some argued that it was a sentence that recognized the depth of her emotional turmoil. The impact on Clara's family was devastating. Lindsay, David's teenage daughter, had witnessed the murder. The trauma from that day would haunt her for the rest of her life. Clara's twin sons, who had once looked up to their mother with love and admiration, now had to reconcile their image of her with the horror of her actions. But was justice truly served? Or did the system fail everyone involved? The questions surrounding Clara Harris's crime would linger long after the verdict was read. Could anyone truly understand the emotional devastation that led to that night? And in the end, was Clara a victim of betrayal, or a woman who had just lost control of her own emotions? In the aftermath of Clara Harris's actions, the devastation rippled far beyond the courtroom. What had been a picture-perfect family, built on trust and shared dreams, now lay in ruins. The effects of one violent act would echo through the lives of everyone involved. Those who witnessed it, those who loved her, and those who had been betrayed. David's children, particularly his teenage daughter, Lindsay, were left to face the horror of seeing their father murdered in front of them. The trauma of that night would stay with her for the rest of her life. A once vibrant family now had to grapple with grief, anger, and an unshakable sense of confusion. For them, the pain of losing their father was compounded by the betrayal they could never fully understand. But what about Clara? What happened to the woman who had once been a successful dentist and a mother, a woman who had loved deeply and trusted with everything she had? The answer was not simple. Clara's emotional and physical toll would not end with her arrest. The guilt and remorse she felt for what she had done would follow her long after the cameras and the headlines faded. Clara was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but after serving 15, she was granted early release in 2018. Yet, even as she stepped back into the world, her past loomed large. The woman who had once stood proudly as a businesswoman and a mother was now a convicted murderer, her identity forever tied to the violence of that night. Clara's life after prison was a quiet, somber one. Rebuilding was a slow process, and some things could never be repaired. Her children, once the center of her world, now lived with a distance that couldn't be closed. She was free, but her family was forever fractured. The public, too, had not forgotten. While some offered empathy, Others held her up as a cautionary tale of a life lost to rage. The themes that resonate through the story are difficult to ignore. Betrayal, rage, desperation, emotions that can sometimes cloud judgment and push even the most rational individuals to act in ways they never thought possible. Clara Harris's tragedy is a reminder of just how dangerous emotional devastation can be, and how it can drive people to commit the unthinkable. What would you do if the person you trusted most shattered your world? For Clara Harris, the answer was deadly. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true crime content. Let us know in the comments, was Clara Harris a victim of betrayal or a cold-blooded killer? Your opinion matters.